Freehold or leasehold? It's the showdown you've been waiting for. There's no need to worry though, because we've got it all broken down for you right here in this super simple chart that'll have you crushing those exam questions like a rock star. Let's conquer them together and level up your game. Let's roll. In order to know the difference between a freehold estate and a leasehold estate, we first have to understand what an estate even is. An estate is the degree, nature, and extent of ownership rights in real property. The extent or type of estate held is determined by the specific portion of the bundle of rights possessed by the individual. Ownership of real property can be either undivided or divided into different types of smaller estates. We'll discuss that a little later in the video. For now, let's move on and meet the main players of these estates, the tenants. While we often associate the term tenant with rentals, in legal terms, a tenant describes anyone holding rights in property. Whether you're the property owner or a renter in possession of another person's property, both fall under the umbrella of being a tenant. Even though there are clear distinctions in the rights of owners and renters, both individuals possess an estate characterized by the duration and quality of those rights. Whether you own or rent a property, in the world of real estate, you assume the role of a tenant with inherent rights. And as we know, the rights of an owner and a renter are as different as night and day. Now that we know what an estate is and who the key players or tenants are, let's dive in on the differences between freehold estates versus non-freehold or leasehold estates. Let's begin with freehold estates. The main thing I want you to remember about freehold estates is that it refers to ownership, and there are two main types: fee simple and life estate. Every individual or tenant who possesses real property holds a freehold estate. These estates, characterized by ownership, do not have a specified time frame for the expiration of rights and are the most desirable and most common type. Let's dive into the first main type of freehold estate: fee simple ownership. In a fee simple estate, often referred to as fee simple, or fee simple absolute, the owner enjoys a comprehensive bundle of rights, which is the set of legal rights associated with the ownership of real property. The bundle is made up of 5 different rights: the right of possession, the right of control, the right of exclusion, the right of enjoyment, and the right of disposition. This type of estate, known for its simplicity and all-encompassing nature, stands out as the most desirable and prevalent form of land ownership. There are 4 distinct ways in which a fee simple estate can be held: in severalty, in common, jointly, and by the entireties. Let's break these down. An estate in severalty means there is only one owner of the entire bundle of rights, and that owner can deed, will, lease, gift, sell, or do whatever they choose with that property as long as it falls within the established easements and zoning laws. The way I remembered this term for my exam was that the word severalty has the word sever in it. So I thought of it as severed or cut off everyone from the property. So a tenancy in severalty is just one person doing all the work on that particular property with no co-ownership. Now that we've discussed the only fee simple freehold estate that's owned by one person, let's move on to the freehold fee simple estates that provide for co-ownership. First up on the list, we've got tenancy in common, which is also known as estate in common. This represents a fee estate held by two or more individuals where each participant holds an undivided interest in the entire property. An undivided interest just means that two or more people have an interest in a property that's held under the same title. The undivided interest encompasses the whole property, and its holders have equal rights to the entire property. Therefore, the undivided interest is not separated into parts or shares. The creation of a tenancy in common ownership can occur through the use of similar or different deeds at the same or different times, and with ownership shares being equal or unequal. Despite these variations, all owners enjoy equal rights of use and possession. Okay, but what about if they want out of that and want to sell their portion of ownership? Owners in a tenancy in common have the freedom to sell or transfer their interest without seeking consent from the other co-owners. And such actions do not infringe upon the rights of the other owners. So if one of the owners in a tenancy in common passes away without a valid will or what we call intestate, their interest in that property will still transfer to that particular owner's heirs after possibly passing through the probate courts. Next up, we've got joint tenancy with the right of survivorship. In this arrangement, you and your co-owner or co-owners share the property equally, and if tragedy strikes and one owner passes away, their share seamlessly passes on to the surviving owner or owners. No drama, no legal battles tied up in probate courts. It's just a smooth transition. It's important to note that the manner of ownership in a joint tenancy determines the transfer of ownership. If you're a joint tenant, you can totally sell your ownership chunk while you're still alive, but then the new owner will turn into a tenant in common because the four unities of possession, interest, time, and title were not created at the same time for a joint tenancy. Let's review the four unities that must be created at the same time to form a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Number 1, unity of possession. This is where each co-owner has an equal right to possess the entire property. Number 2, unity of interest. All co-owners will hold an equal share or interest in the property. Number 3, unity of time. This means the co-owners must acquire the property at the same time. And number 4, unity of title. This just means that the co-owners must acquire the property through the same deed or will. In Florida and some other states, to make this joint tenancy pact official, you have to clearly spell out the right of survivorship in the property deed. If you forget to include this clause, the property doesn't go into chaos mode. Instead, it'll just default to a regular tenancy in common setup where each owner's share doesn't automatically transfer to the others if they decide to exit the real estate deal. So, as you can see, creating a joint tenancy makes it impossible to include your interest in that property in a will, as you can only sell your interest in the property while you're still alive. And once you pass on, your interest in that property just passes on to the surviving co-owner or co-owners. Okay, let's move on to the last freehold fee simple estate that allows for co-ownership. Tenancy by the entireties. Tenancy by the entireties is an exclusive property arrangement designed solely for a married couple. Within this estate, the marriage itself is recognized as the technical owner of the property, and both spouses enjoy equal ownership plus a right of survivorship. If one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse automatically inherits the property in fee simple as an individual estate, or what we already learned is called inseveralty. Due to the distinctive character of this setup, any individual actions by one spouse that affect ownership must receive explicit consent from the other, and unilateral decisions are not permitted. This includes restrictions on incurring debts, placing mortgages, selling individual interests outside the marriage, or making unilateral decisions in a will. These precautions are in place to safeguard the marital unit from any inappropriate actions that might adversely affect either party. Tenancy by the entireties is established automatically in certain states when a married couple jointly purchases property, provided both names are on the deed and no alternative ownership form is specified, unless determined otherwise by a court. However, in the unfortunate event of a divorce, the property ownership transfers into a tenancy in common. It's worth noting that tenancy by the entireties is not recognized in every state. It's only recognized in 25 U.S. states plus the District of Columbia. Here is a list of the 25 states that recognize tenancy by the entireties. Now that we've covered the fee simple forms of ownership, let's move on to the second type of freehold ownership, the life estate. A life estate is a type of freehold estate when a fee simple estate owner transfers ownership to another individual, but only for the duration of that recipient's lifetime. The individual receiving this limited ownership is referred to as the life tenant. Throughout the life tenant's existence, they enjoy full rights to the property, allowing them to lease, mortgage, or even sell the property. It's crucial, though, that the life tenant does not transfer more rights than they possess and must maintain the property for the eventual recipient upon their death. As the life tenant loses control of the property upon death, any leasing, mortgaging, or selling activities will stop. This ensures that the rights associated with the property termination are aligned with the conclusion of the life tenant's lifespan. The deed creating a life estate must include provisions for the transfer of ownership upon the life tenant's death. The individual establishing the life estate, known as the grantor, may opt to reclaim property ownership either for themselves or their heirs. This right to regain ownership is termed a reversion estate. Alternatively, the grantor may prefer the property to pass on to another person or entity as designated in the original deed. When someone other than the initial owner is set to inherit, it is referred to as a remainder estate. The distinction between a reversion estate and a remainder estate lies in determining who will ultimately receive ownership. For example, if the property owner, Amanda, grants a life estate to her son, Brian, in the deed, Amanda must stipulate that if Brian passes away, the property ownership reverts back to her. In this case, Amanda will hold a reversion estate. Think of it as being reversed back to the grantor. Now, suppose David conveys a property to Emma for her lifetime and designates that upon Emma's death, the property will transfer to his grandchildren. In this scenario, the grandchildren hold a remainder estate. That completes the freehold section of the chart, but hold on, because we're going to venture into the 3 non-freehold estates next. The leasehold territory. Here, tenants aren't rulers. They're more like temporary VIPs with the right to use and possess. A non-freehold or leasehold estate means that the tenant does not hold ownership interest in the property, but holds only the right of possession and use. There are 3 categories of non-freehold estates: tenancy at will, tenancy for years, and tenancy at sufferance. Let's begin with tenancy at will. This type involves the tenant being in lawful possession without a definite time limit for termination. Whether oral or written, it's known as a period-to-period tenancy. Keep in mind, all oral leases fall under tenancies at will. Termination can occur through the sale of the property, the death of either party, or at the discretion of either the landlord or tenant by providing appropriate legal notice. A tenancy for years is a non-freehold estate where the tenant lawfully possesses the property under an agreement with the landlord, specifying a definite period. This type of tenancy requires a clear beginning and ending date, both explicitly stated. Additionally, a tenancy for years must be in writing, bearing the signature of the landlord and witnessed by 2 individuals. Termination of a tenancy for years can happen through mutual agreement, expiration of the agreed upon lease period, or a breach of contract, potentially leading to legal action. While the tenant is in possession of the property, the landlord holds an estate in reversion. A tenancy at sufferance is a non-freehold estate that emerges when a tenant occupies a landlord's real estate without any formal agreement, often occurring when a tenant holds over post-lease expiration. It can be terminated by either the landlord or tenant without notice. In such cases, the tenant is obligated to pay the landlord fair market rent for the duration of their occupancy. Imagine it as like a guest that has overstayed their welcome. All right, so now that we've covered the difference between a freehold estate and a leasehold estate, I hope this video helped you understand and organize these concepts a little more so that you could study them further for your exam. If you found this video informative and helpful, kindly hit that like button, subscribe, and share the knowledge. Until our next session, keep those real estate aspirations thriving. I'm Maggie Reynoso with Just Call Maggie. Thank you so much for joining us today.